Hey, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and in this video, you'll learn how to create a responsive video player using the React Player component from CodeSandbox, as well as how to use a callback prop to change an element's state based on how much of the video a user has watched. So like a lot of my recent tutorials, I'm going to get started right here in CodeSandbox.io. Now, if you've never heard of CodeSandbox.io, essentially all it is an online browser-based code editor. And the reason that this is really cool is it allows me to really easily share code and also update code. And you don't have to worry about setting any of this stuff up on your local machine. We can just dive right into the code and get started. And another really cool thing is it allows you to create different development environments or sandboxes in just a single click. And what we're going to be doing today is creating a Gatsby sandbox. Now, there's really no reason or benefit of why I'm doing this beyond of just introducing you to Gatsby, because it's a tool that I really love to use. And I'm not going to go into why Gatsby is awesome or why you should use it. But essentially what it is a React framework that's based on this idea of Jamstack architecture. And Jamstack stands for JavaScript, APIs, and Markdown. So the way it works is that you have your content somewhere. So it could be a headless CMS like Contentful. And then in Gatsby, you call that data down through an API using GraphQL. And then once you have that data, you can tell that data where it should go. And you can build templates and pages and things like that. And then once you have your project done, you run it, Gatsby build. It builds a super efficient, optimized version of your site. And then you can host that on something like Netlify. So with that said, let's go ahead and create that sandbox here and just click on Gatsby to create that instance. Now this one's actually not going to be in our actual sandbox. So what we need to do is come up here and click on fork, and then you can see that it's in your actual sandbox. And it actually needs to initialize the project first. And it looks like we had an error here for some reason. And I'm not sure what that's all about. So let's just go ahead and refresh that. And now it's going to start installing the packages. So I'm just going to jump forward to when this process finishes and then just pick up from there. All right, so that didn't take too long. And you can see now that we have this Gatsby starter project. What I'm going to do is first thing I'm just going to change the name. So React Video Player. And let's go ahead and just get rid of some of this starter code. And then we can get rid of some of these imports that we don't need anymore. And if we save that, you'll see now that we should just have the header and the footer left. And now what we want to do is come into components, and I'm going to create a new folder here, and this is going to be called video. Create another one, and that's going to be called lesson. And inside the video, I'm going to create a file called responsiveplayer.jsx. And I'm also going to create a CS file called responsive-player.css. And in the lesson folder, I'm going to create a new file called lesson.jsx and another one called lesson.css. So let's jump into the responsive player here and open this up in our project. And now we can jump over to GitHub and we can talk about the React component that I'm using from CodeSandbox, which is called React Player. And this is a React component that allows you to play a different variety of videos from either URLs, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Vimeo, Wistia, a whole bunch of different options here. And another really cool thing about this is, one, you can pass in props onto this React player in order to customize it. You can also use callback props in order to use really cool things like onProgress, which returns a played value, which represents a fraction of the video that's been played. So you could use that information to, let's say, mark a lesson complete if a viewer has watched at least 70% of the video, which is what we're going to be doing later in the course. So now that you have kind of a brief idea of what this is, usually what you would do is you would use either NPM or Yarn in order to add this to your project. Now, because we're using CodeSandbox, the way we add dependencies is first coming down to add dependency, searching for what we want to add. So React Player, we can see here the one by CodeSandbox, what we want. So we just click on that. And you can see here in our terminal it's starting to add this into our project. And what we want to do now is we want to create a responsive React player. So they actually have documentation on this. So if we search responsive, we can see here that it gives us some code that we can use. And it also gives you a fixed aspect ratio box, which I think dives into a little bit more of, what the idea of an aspect ratio box, which is essentially what it does is it sets the wrapper to relative, the player to absolute, and it uses this fraction component or this fraction padding top, which is based off of the ratio of the video, which is 16:9 in this case. So 1920 by 1080. And that's 100 divided by that ratio, and that gives us this percentage. So if you want to learn more about that, check out and read this article from CSS Tricks. But what I'm going to do is just copy this, come back into my project, and then paste it in. Now I actually want to turn this to a function component. So const, get rid of this, just do an arrow function, and then we can get rid of this render as well. And you can get rid of this curly bracket on here. So if we save that, we first need to then export defaults responsive player. And for some reason, I'm still getting an error, and that's because I have this curly bracket up here for some reason. And cool. So now what we need to do is make sure we are importing the things we need. And the first one is React. So import React from React. We need to import the React player from React player. And we also need to import the CSS. And that's going to be in the same directory here. And then just the name of the file. So responsive player.css. So if we save that, we should be good to go. And now what we need to do is we need to come into that CSS here, come into this example, and just copy this CSS code, paste it in, and then we can save that. And I'm actually going to replace this URL with one of my favorite YouTube channels, which is In a Nutshell. So I'm just going to copy this URL here for the video and then paste it here and then save it. And now what we can do is we can actually use this component here in our index or homepage. So let's come over here, and what we want to do is start typing responsive. And now we can see here, if I use my down arrow and then tab, I can auto import that. So it imports it up here, saves me some time, close that component off. And now if we save it, we have this video. And let's go ahead and open this in a new window and just show you that it's responsive. So you can see how it resizes. If we open this back up, we can go ahead and play it. And looks good, but notice something. There's no controls down here, which is kind of weird. If I was a user, I'd kind of want to be able to adjust the volume and stop and pause. So what can we do? Well, what we can do, if we come back into this GitHub here, you can see that we have some props that we can pass in. And the prop that we want to pass in is the controls prop. So if this is set to true, we'll be able to see the controls. So let's come back into our project, come into our responsive player here, and let's go ahead and set a prop here to controls, and we're setting that equal to true. So if we save that, and then let's go ahead and refresh this. Now when we play this, we should see the controls, which we do. And now we can mute it. We can jump forward in the video. We can pause it, turn on the caption, so on and so forth. All right, so now you can get an idea of some of the flexibility here with these props. And the next thing we want to do is we want to use, instead of passing in just this generic or this like standard video, it's going to use it all the time because it's just hard coded in. But what we want to do is also pass in a prop here. And this name of this prop is just going to be equal to the name of this, which is this URL. Now, right now it's complaining because it doesn't know what URL is referring to. And we could, call or access this called props.url and then pass in the props up here. But an easier way is to just destructure the values up here. So let's go ahead and delete the props, and then in curly braces, we can destructure this and just call URL like that. So if we save this, this is actually going to go away because we're not passing in a URL. But if we come back to our dashboard, or excuse me, our index.jss, pass in that prop of URL, and then we can set the value here to this URL. So if we pass that in, save that, we now should get the video back. There we go. And the next prop that we want to pass in is the onProgress callback prop. Now, if you've never heard of a callback prop, essentially, here's the basic definition. So a callback prop is a function that gets passed as prop to a child component, so the child component can execute it whenever it wants. After a button is clicked, a form is submitted, an API request failed. Callback props are the React way of passing actions from parents to children. Okay, that's cool. So it's going to be passing us something that we can then do something with. Okay, so let's go ahead and write this onProgress. And we're just going to set that equal to onProgress. That's the name of the prop that we're going to pass in. And we also need to destructure this up here. And let's come back into this example here and come back to the callback props. You can see that this onProgress, I just didn't make this up. I'm referring to the actual documentation here. And this onProgress is going to return an object. And on that object, we're going to have 4 values: played, loaded, played seconds, and then loaded seconds. And the one we're going to be actually using is played, which is a fraction of how much the video is played. So once this hits 0.7, we can say, hey, change the state of something on our actual in our component once this hits 70%. So in this case, it's going to be, make the button show that it's been completed. So let's come back into our project now. And I'm going to come and actually create a new component here in our lessons. Or actually not create it. We already have the file, but I'm going to go ahead and actually start writing the code here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a lesson component, which is going to hold a video, and it's going to hold that marker that's going to show if the lesson's been completed or not. So what we want to do is go ahead and start writing that code here. And the first thing we need to do is import React. So let's import React. And we also need to import the CSS. And we also need to import the responsive player, but I'll do that below and just auto import it. So then we'll create a function component. And what we want to do here is return first a div that's going to wrap the code. And we need to first call in the responsive player. And I'm just going to start typing this out, come down, click tab, and auto import that. And what we want to do is set the props here. And in this case, we want to set that to that same video that we've been using. And then we want to call the onProgress prop. And we want to set this to a function. And now right now this function doesn't exist, but let's go ahead and just write it out. And that's going to be handleWatchComplete. Okay. And once we have that, we need to make sure we close that up. And this is complaining because, like I said, this isn't something that exists right now. And let's just go ahead and stop here for now. And we'll worry about the marker below. But what we need to do now is we need to go ahead and first we want to set up the state. And that state's going to be called watchComplete. And then we need to go ahead and write this really simple function here. So to do that, in order to create the state, that is, we're going to use a React hook called useState. And this is really cool because before React hooks, we had to use class components in order to use state. But with React hooks, we can actually use state and function components. So in order to do that, we first write const, then an array, and the first value is going to be the value or the name of the state, which in this case is watchComplete. The next one is what we're going to call in order to change that state value. And a good naming convention is just calling it set and then the name of the state. So in this case, set watch complete. And then we then call equals to useState, auto import that. And then we can set the initial value here, which in our case, we want the watch complete to be set to false. Now, I'm just going to remind you guys that this is a very simplified idea, right? If this was on a real site, we would have, user authentication. We would check the database to see if the user has completed this at a different time. We then would set that to the state, so on and so forth. So this is just an example. So don't expect that this is, real code that you're going to use on your site. It's just to get the idea across. So once we have that, we now have that state ready and ready to use somewhere. We're going to use it here in this function. So const handle watch complete. And this is, again, just a good naming convention. So this is going to handle the watch complete, and then we're going to call set watch complete in this. And this is going to be an arrow function. And what we actually want to do is we're going to get state back from this onProgress. So let's go ahead and just put that state here and then console.log that state out. And next we need to make sure we're exporting this. So export default lesson. And then we need to make sure we're using this lesson in our index page instead of the responsive player. So let's just go ahead and delete that import as well. And we can start writing lesson and then auto import that. All right, so if we save that, we now, we still see the same thing, but if we come into our console, so you can see actually it's already printed that object, that state we get back. But if we go ahead and play that, you'll see that it keeps printing all of these objects, which is coming from our onProgress callback prop. So if we go ahead and just pause this and come into this object and expand it, you can see that we have those 4 values. And the one that we care about is this played value. Now, if we come back into we want to come into, the lesson here, we could access that on state.played. So if we save that and start playing it, we get that value back. But remember, an easier way is to just destructure this. So let's get rid of state, get our parentheses, and destructure played here. So if we save that, it's just a shorter way of writing it. And now we can see that is being written as well. So we can use this data in order to check to see where the user is in watching the video and then change the state here of watch complete. But first, let's go ahead and use watch complete down here in this component in order to change the class name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right after this responsive player and create a new div. And this div is going to have a class name, and in between it is going to be the words completed. So let's do class name. And this class name is going to be a ternary operator. Now, a ternary operator, what it does is it takes an argument, then it says, if this is true or false, what do you want me to do? And if it's false, what do you want me to do? So the first one is going to be the argument. So we want to look at watch complete, which is the name of our state. And if we just write it like this, like watch complete, what this essentially is saying is watch complete true? And right now you can see watch complete is false. Okay, so is watch complete true? If this is true, we want to set the class name to marker dash dash is dash complete. And we still need to come through and write this CSS. Now, if this is false, we want to mark it as not complete. So we'll do marker dash dash, not complete. So if we save that, you'll see nothing's changed because we haven't written that code yet. So now let's come into our lesson.css file and write that code, or that CSS rather. And the first one is our marker. style. And this is just going to be the general marker styles. So that's going to be padding, top and bottom of 15 pixels, left and right of 20 pixels. Margin, just give us some spacing on the top and bottom. And we'll set display to inline block. Then we can go ahead and do our other ones on here. So marker -- not complete. And here we're going to set a background color. And I'm just going to use CSS color value names instead of actual hex codes. So we'll set that to gray. We'll set the font color to dark gray. And then we can go ahead and just copy this. And we can change this instead of not complete to is complete. And in this case, the background color is going to be spring green, a very nice color. And the color for the font is going to be white. So if we save that, what color is it going to be? You guessed it, not complete, right? Because now if we look back, that's because watch complete isn't true. So we're not going to set it to this, it's false. So we're going to set it to this, which matches these styles. All right, so we're using state now. As you can see here, it's no longer opaque like the set watch complete, but we do now need to change this based off of this value here of played. And we're going to do that in the handleWatchComplete function here. So let's come up here and write a really simple if statement that checks the value of this. So if played is greater than or equal to 0.7, and this is the important part, watch complete is not false, or excuse me, if watch complete is false. And this is important because let's say, for instance, we went past 70% and then we went back, this would change. So we need to make sure that watch complete is already false. So once we go past it, it's going to be set to true, and then this won't run again. And then here's what we want to do. We want to change the state using set watch complete. And what do we want to change it to? True. All right, so now once we save that, we have the functionality ready to go. So let's actually start watching this. Okay. So let's come back to, let's see, I'm not sure what good, 75%. I'm just going to guess here, somewhere around here. Start watching this. And there you go. You can see that the state of this div changes, right? It's really cool. So if we come in and inspect this, you'll see that it is now have the class of marker is complete. And let's go ahead and make sure that if we scroll back that it doesn't change. Okay, so this logic up here is working. And now it's still marked as complete. There you go. So I hope this video was a good representation of how powerful and flexible the React Player component is from CodePete. Now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and recommend it to your friends. And be sure to check out our other design development courses on our YouTube channel and on skillthrive.com.